accounts to really address two different audiences at some time. So while his social media accounts may say one thing, we're likely to hear a more measured approach from the president when he briefs the media at the White House later on this morning. But we do not know. Donald Trump throughout his political life has been unpredictable, and he tends to say unpredictable things in unexpected ways. So as to what the president will say this morning, we'll find out when he takes the podium later today. But certainly, I will tell you there was a stark contrast between what was posted on Truth Social and what came out on the official White House statement from the President of the United States earlier today.
Yeah, I agree with that one for sure, Tom. Thanks very much. And of course, we heard from Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy. He taking a measured approach as well, saying that, listen, we have to get a lot of answers here. We have the same questions as you do. We've seen the same videos that you have, and we have questions that we need to get answered before we make any public statements on that. Hopefully, they're getting some of that addressed right now, and when we join them around 11 o'clock, they'll have some of those answers for us.
And we'll bring that to you live. Stay with us here on Fox 5 as we continue to cover this breaking and developing news happening regarding the tragedy on the Potomac.
All right, we take a look across the area. We have a number of cameras that we've been keeping an eye on as far as the recovery efforts that continue this morning and will continue throughout the day today after the collision last night between the commercial airplane out of Wichita, Kansas, and of course the U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter that has led to what we believe to be the deaths of 67 people. We don't have the full manifest yet, but it was believed that 60 passengers and 4 crew are on board the airplane, 3 soldiers on board the Black Hawk helicopter.
Yes, and we have correspondents spanned out all over the area, near the airport, inside of the airport, gathering all the latest details. We can tell you that we do expect to hear from President Trump at the top of the...
Hi, I'm regional commercial actor Neil Patrick Harris. I love Rise Mushroom Coffee, and not just because I look good drinking it.
Hello there.
I also like the improved focus and all-day energy. Plus, it's easy on the stomach. That's because we use only the best organic mushrooms, like Stumpy Warthog. bird in the bushes, and found a hare in marsupius, which sound like made-up names because they are. Rise mushroom coffee. Drink it cold or hot like me.
Welcome to the Waverhood.
The Wayfair vibe at our place is Western.
My thing, darling, shine.
Gardening.
Some of us go for the dramatic.
How didn't I know Wayfair had vanities and tile? How?
This? Yeah. Do you have any ottomans without legs? Sean, you'll flip for the poop cart. In the Waverhood, there's a place for all of us.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
Its rounds. You can still see that helicopter actually, and I captured some video this morning of it just making just sort of circling around that body of water, hoping to find potential debris or even more victims. But this has so far just been the sight and the sounds pretty much around Reagan National this morning. We also learned that some of the debris discovered has in fact floated south toward the Woodrow Wilson Bridge near the National Harbor. So we've seen from the has in fact floated south toward the Woodrow Wilson Bridge near the National Harbor. So we've seen from the acting county executive there, Tara Jackson, that the piers and the plaza there at the National Harbor has been closed so that the recovery mission can continue to get underway. But as you can imagine, guys, just hearts are extremely heavy this morning. So many people are just really finding it difficult to process this news that over 60 people just trying to land so close to landing right here at Reagan National Airport encountered tragedy in the overnight hours. And one couple that I ran into a few minutes ago, we have Antoine and Charlene, they're DC natives, and this is a special place for you all. You were telling me that you all come out pretty much every day to take in the sights and the sounds along the river. But this morning, it feels a little different knowing what happened last night. Just tell me what it's like to sort of process this information in a place that you all, that's very special to you both.
First off, I want to send my condolences to the families of this tragic. It's bad. And, you know, we come out here every day for the past 2 years. It's been peaceful. You know, I want to take it back in the 80s when the first plane crashed here in D.C. You know, we never witnessed nothing like this in 38 years of me living. And I want to let you guys know this is super heartbreaking. So once again, you know, we want to send our condolences out to the family, the friends, immediate family, to all of the tragedy.
Yes.
Thank you.
It's so hard to process. You know, we've been asking people, you know, a lot of people are booking summer travel and you know, spring break is around the corner. And so these airports are going to be busy over the next few months. And so I'm asking you, does this affect how you feel when it comes to travel at all, knowing that this happened?
I'm scared now, even more scared.
Why?
We actually come down here, me and my wife, we've been coming out, like I said, for the past 2 years, and we've been processing, watching the planes take off and coming and take off, because that's one of my fears. You know, I'm afraid of heights, and being in the air is, it's unbelievable. But seeing something that close to home, it hurts. So I honestly, I think I prefer traveling by train now.
What would make you more comfortable? And even for those watching who may have a little bit of anxiety given what happened last night, what do you think that officials could do more of to maybe ease some of those concerns?
It's going to be hard, honestly.
It just take some time, right?
It's going to take time, patience. Hopefully we all get through this just as well as the family do. Yes, ma'am.
Antoine, Charlene, thank you so much for just giving us a few moments of your time as we all just try to get through this together. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, guys. And so that's just giving you more of a sense of how people are feeling today in and around the city. We talked to a longtime Virginia resident a few moments ago, and now Antoine and Charlene from DC. So just the DMV as well as the rest of the country just hurting this morning. And I'd even say globally, knowing that there were some talent aboard from other countries. back to you.
And
Thanks,
you can
Makia.
feel that, Makia, the sadness, the shock, and even more now as we learn more about the people who are on board.
Well, as always, you start to see the faces of those who
Yes.
are impacted by this, and the emotions get even stronger. And to Makia's point there, with the gentleman she was talking to, there's so many layers of this, right? In the tragedy itself, which unfortunately you hear playing out in other places, which leads to this happening here. We're very territorial, right? We want everything to be good in our backyard, which our backyard is the DMV, and so it hits everybody a little more personally just from that level. And then you have the extreme personal level of knowing that there are people in our area that are that watch us, or that are potential to watch us all the time, that their lives will forever be changed because of these incidents that happen. So you have the surface, I think, grief like that gentleman had, where it's just like, okay, let me question what I feel about this and how I'm feeling, and what do I want to do with my future of air travel. And then you have the people where it's just like, wow, this really can't happen anywhere.
It can.
Even though it's been 15 years since there's been a commercial crash in the United States, this was the time for this to happen in DC. And then obviously, because it was here, you have people who were traveling back to this area from Wichita, where the flight originated.
Yeah, it can happen to anywhere, anytime. And we heard that echoed from a woman at the airport, and Melanie Alwick reports as well. We want to get to our newsroom and check in with Stephen Braddock and Jacqueline Matter. You all have more information on the victims.
Guys, you mentioned some of the faces and the names and the souls that might have been lost in all of this. And we just wanted to kind of give you some context to who might have been on that flight, at least to the folks who have been confirmed this far.
Yeah, we know that there were 67 people on board both the helicopter as well as the American Airlines flight, but really not getting a whole lot as far as confirmation numbers are concerned. But we did hear earlier, probably about an hour and a half ago, from the Skating Club of Boston. We took that live here on Fox 5, and they confirmed 6 members of their skating club were among those who had passed away. 2 of them skaters there, Spencer Lane, who is 16, and Gina Hahn, who is 16 as well. Spencer Lane, they referred to him as a phenom, an up-and-coming skater. We do have a photo of what Spencer Lane had tweeted, or excuse me, posted on Instagram yesterday. You can see that in the upper right-hand corner. He posted that before he got on the flight there with the call letters for Wichita, Kansas to DCA. We also heard from the spokesperson there. His mom was reportedly on the flight with him, Christine Lane, and then Gina Hahn's mom, Jin Hahn, was also reportedly on that flight too.
Yeah, and a little bit about Spencer. I mean, we went through all of his social media, went through the club just to kind of see who he was. He was a phenom. I mean, he was just a great skater, and along with a few other skaters from Boston Skate Club, I think 4 finalists actually finalized in that competition that they were doing in Wichita. But he also put in a separate post this. He says, "I'm happy to have qualified for the National Development Camp earlier in November." So he just qualified for this camp that he was a part of in Wichita, which ended up starting January the 21st on Tuesday, just of last week, and then now to this. And of course, a few of those skaters stayed behind to get that extra training with their coaches, getting some special attention and look at from a lot of the skaters there, skaters from around the world. Some of the best skaters were there to celebrate and, of course, be with some of the best champions in the world to skate.
Yeah, you mentioned some of the coaches as well. We do believe 2 of the coaches of Gina Hahn and Spencer Lane were there as well. Vadim Namov and Evgenia Shivkova. Those 2, they were married, and they competed in figure skating for years. Here's some photos of them. They actually won the gold in 1994, were world champions, and then won silver and bronze in 93 and 95, respectively. So they themselves were phenoms of the skating world, training these younger generations. And so I did find a video on social media of Evgenia coaching Gina at a competition back in November. And, it looked like they were very close. Oftentimes there are dedicated athletes that spend hours and hours in the gym with their coaches. So you have to imagine the bond they may have had together, but all of them traveling as a family, in a sense, the skating family. And Something I did want to note as well, this is not the first time that the figure skating community has been affected by air tragedy. Actually, in 1961, 18 members of the U.S. figure skating team died in a plane crash en route to the World Championships in Prague. So we heard the Skating Club of Boston mention just how devastating this is for the figure skating community as a whole.
Yeah, and of course, these skaters, again, coming from all around the country, sometimes the world, to be a part of what we consider one of the best skating events to happen at the top of the year. Guys, just simple tragedy. We can't stress it enough that these skaters, some of them young, some of them old, parents coming to accompany them. Of course, our newsroom is busy this morning, working hard to try to get more information about those people who may have been affected on this flight, guys.
Stephen, Jacqueline bringing us the details there. Just a couple things we want to point out before we go to break. You know, to their point, and if people are wondering about the the correlation between the skaters and the coaches, you know, a lot of these were the younger kids who stayed after the national championships just to get a little more time with some of these elite coaches. It was a little bonus time for them to become greater skaters.
All right, we'll have much more on those skaters, on all of the victims, and the latest on the investigation on the other side of the break.
All right, welcome back to our coverage of the crash last night at Reagan National Airport between a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter and a commercial airline flight from Wichita, Kansas to Washington, D.C., DCA. We're coming up on the 11 o'clock hour. And just to let you know, a little housekeeping here. We are expecting to hear from the President of the United States shortly. Also expected to hear from other cabinet officials. We know for sure the Transportation Secretary. Don't know yet if we'll hear from the Secretary of Defense or not. He did make a statement last night. We're waiting on an updated one this morning as well. But they typically defer to the president when it comes to this. But Sean Duffy, of course, Transportation Secretary, did speak out earlier. He was at Reagan National Airport with Mayor Bowser and other city officials. They have since turned the investigation over to the feds because now, unfortunately, when they realized there was no more chance of rescue in this case, the rescue mission was headed up by D.C. officials. When they learned that this would be, in fact, a recovery mission, meaning no survivors. Then it turned into a federal investigation.
And now the NTSB is involved. In terms of numbers, we know that 67 people total are expected to have been involved and passed away in this collision. We know that the majority of those were on that commercial flight, 3 others on the military aircraft that collided just before 9 o'clock last night. And we know that more than 300 first responders went to the area, the scene of that crash, and did all that they could for hours on end, searching, looking for those victims, and they did not see and find any signs of life. They had to fight treacherous conditions overnight. We understand it was brutally cold, of course, and it has been. And also there was ice in the water. They had to literally break through the ice to get to the bodies and to also get to some of the materials from the aircrafts themselves that now that they will go through meticulously to find out how something like this could have happened.
They do believe the victims are contained essentially in the area of where the aircraft went into the water. They have to go into the wreckage of the fuselage of the commercial aircraft by hand, essentially, and try to find the remains of those who were on board. In the big picture there, and we have a couple different angles of this camera from the wharf and our other camera that we have from Southwest DC. But, you know, something that's interesting that you could kind of see is, you know, we've had this shot up throughout the day today. What appears to be the wreckage of the helicopter, and we've seen some other shots that have wreckage of more of the fuselage. It's in very shallow water. There is a channel in the Potomac in that area for the shipping channel, the deeper, larger vessels, that's about 30 feet deep. But a good chunk of the water in that part of the river is only about 8 feet deep. And we heard from the DC fire chief, actually, that in some of the places where the plane, in particular, the fuselage came to rest, it's only waist deep water. So very shallow. And that's why in some of these cases, you're seeing not the full-size boats, but you see some of the, you know, there's rescue boats that can go on, you know, essentially skirt on top of the water. They don't need to be in any type of deep water. And also we saw a couple of jet skis go by as well, which you rarely ever see on the Potomac River. But a few of those were just floating by as well recently, as they still have dozens and dozens of people in the water that are going to be working throughout the day today on the recovery mission.
And as we await to hear from President Trump as he takes the podium in just a couple of minutes, we want to look at what former presidents are saying. We understand that former President Obama as well as Biden have both posted statements on X. This one's coming in from former President Biden. Jill and I are praying for the families of the victims who tragically lost their lives in the plane and helicopter crash near DCA. We are immensely grateful to the brave first responders and emergency personnel on the scene.
There's a quote from former President Obama as well, saying our hearts break for the families who lost loved ones in the tragic plane and helicopter crash at DCA. Michelle and I send our prayers and condolences to everyone mourning today, and we are grateful to the first responders who are doing everything they can to help. We're going to, we just had the photo up from the briefing room at the White House, and they're clearly, you know, correspondents are in position, and they're just waiting for the president to come out to address the nation. That is expected to happen in a few minutes. When it does, we'll get to it. Right now, we want to go back to the airport. That's where Lili Zhang is this morning. And Lili, we'll send it over to you right now, because I know you have a rather unique vantage point of some of the activity behind you. But keep in mind, if we interrupt you, it's only because we're going to the president, okay?
So we are by Gravelly Point. This is basically a few hundred yards away from the runways over by Reagan. As you guys mentioned, this is a massive operation in terms of recovery. And behind us, this is, I'm going to move out of the way here so our photojournalist Matthew Myers can kind of give you guys a better look at it. This is an idea of what we're seeing out here. You can see that area is taped off. Gravelly Point typically is an area that a lot of people might come to do some plane spotting, watching the planes land and take off. That is not what we're seeing out here. In fact, I don't really see anyone who would be kind of typically, you know, out here to get taking the scenic views. Not seeing that at all out here. But I will tell you, you know, in the past 20 or so minutes since you guys last came to us, I have seen more first responder types coming out, more emergency crews coming out. What we have not confirmed is specifically what area of operation this area is focused on. So that's some of the information we're trying to get out here. However, as we've been hearing this morning from the DC fire chief, that, you know, we were told that they are confident that they are going to find all the remains of those who have died in this crash, but it's going to take time. This is, again, a really massive operation, very somber mood out here as well. So just imagine the conditions that these guys, these women are working out here in. So we will keep you guys posted as soon as we learn specifically what is happening behind us. This is, again, about as close as we're going to be able to get without impeding on their operation. But like you guys mentioned, a pretty unique view of what we're seeing out here in terms of this operation.
Lily, we literally just saw like 10 seconds ago a plane landing right behind you on the runway there at DCA. Is that the first plane that's gone through this morning?
We haven't seen, that was the first time we've seen it too. So perhaps, I think we mentioned before that the airport mentioned they would be closing until 11 a.m. So we're right at that hour mark now. So we haven't seen that up until just a few minutes ago, like you guys saw.
All right, right. I mean, right on schedule at 11 o'clock, it appears, or just a few minutes after. Lily, thanks very much. We appreciate it. Lily Zing down at the at Reagan National Airport, right by Gravelly Point, where people go to watch to get the close views of the planes taking off and landing.
And you can definitely see the robust activity behind her. And we've learned, too, that the whole investigation has stretched because they found debris as far away as the National Harbor area. And that's why some piers and areas around there are now closed. So it's definitely a large swath of area they have to cover.
So it's one of those things where, you know, it's obviously it's a terrible event. It's a tragic event, but there are a lot of responders that have to work this and have been out there working since 9 o'clock last night. And their job is not an easy one. Stephanie Ramirez has more on those efforts and what that entails and how they get that part of the job done. Steph?
Yeah, arduous is the word that the DC Police Union chair or president had said on social media today, and we are hearing it live as to why. Now, we're not going to say exactly because it is disturbing, but listening to first responder communication as of 10:48, right? So not that long ago, maybe 10, 15 minutes ago at this point, there were more remains recovered, but this is not full bodies being pulled from the wreckage. It's body parts that are being recovered, and it's disturbing. And so that is the work that is being done here by all the heroic first responders. I'm going to step out of your way and show you. This is the recovery collection site here, the casualty collection site here at Southwest. This is DC Police's heliport, and this is where all the boats are bringing their remains to, as well as the debris that they are collecting from this crash site. And then, as we've been telling you all morning, all the remains, the human remains from the victims, are being taken to the tents to the right of us, and that's where a makeshift morgue is located this morning. We have been hearing of transports. We're hearing when more remains are found, and they're bringing it to this site. And I can tell you, being here since this in the early morning hours, there were first responders who were upset because this is such a disturbing site here. Over 12 different agencies from all across the region assisting in this. You're talking about the debris, right? The debris field moving. We've learned that that has now moved closer toward National Harbor. So the county executive had announced that the piers and plazas are closed at National Harbor. That's also a complication I'm hearing from sources. We know that the Potomac is a difficult waterway to deal with on a regular summer's day, right? The heavy currents, the caves underneath. Now, we know that there's some 5-foot distances, a little bit more where this crash happened, but it's still different currents that they're dealing with. We were told by neighbors they had to break through ice. And now with the debris field in these waters that aren't exactly clear, it's a danger to respond to this as well. And so trying to make sure that the first responders are safe while doing all the work they can is a challenge, but it's a challenge that they are getting done here. I know we're waiting for press conferences to happen, guys. So as soon as that happens, just let me know. I'll toss it back to you. But in the meantime, we are reaching out. I was speaking with an NTSB spokesperson who was telling me with regard to the debris that's being pulled here, that is going to be evidence at some point. And so there are plans to take it to another location that might be a nearby hangar, but we do not have that confirmed yet. They are planning a news conference for this early afternoon where I'm sure those questions will be asked or those details, that information will be shared. Also want to talk about a very somber scene that we saw here this morning. Our colleague Josh Rosenthal, who had been reporting all through the night, he had captured on camera a moment where it looked like there was a coffin, first responders lined up, and an American flag, draped over that coffin. And we've been asking first responders, nobody's officially confirmed yet, but they do believe that it's likely that was the Army service member whose body was recovered, and that's usually typically the level of respect that's given to a service member. The sources I've been talking to saying that they are trying to give the utmost respect to all of the victims in this crash, making sure that they are taken care of with regard to their remains properly transferred, and trying to identify as much as they can as quickly as possible. We have not heard at this hour of any more remains identified, but they are working on bringing what they can in still. And I'm told to expect this footprint, this scene here, to last for a little bit. We don't know how long that's going to be, but if you're driving through the area, you live through the area, expect the checkpoints, expect the road closures. It's a big deal. It's going to be a big deal for a little bit of time. Guys.
Stephanie, when you talk about those somber views that we saw earlier this morning, I saw that reporting too from our very own Josh Rosenthal, and that same image with the flag draped over the coffin. He also panned over and you could see luggage in a stroller.
Yeah.
That they were removing. So
that's tough.
It's heartbreaking.
All right, we want to get back down to the airport. By the way, that flight that just landed appears to be a flight from Minneapolis that left a couple of hours ago. Just landed safely at DCA. Let's get down there now. Tom Fitzgerald is joined by Mayor Bowser. Tom.
Yeah, good morning, Mayor Bowser. Over the last couple of hours, a lot of questions. What is the number one thing you're working on right now?
Our focus is having DC Fire and EMS continue to support the recovery effort.
You've had briefings. The conditions that are out there right now have been awful for those folks that are working out in the water, and they're still out there right now. What have you heard with what they're putting up with?
Our first responders, this is what they do. This is what they're trained for. We have our DC Fire. We have MPD boats out. We're supported by the fire boats from all around this region, Virginia and Maryland, and federal resources as well, divers going into the water. The NTSB is taking the lead on the investigation of this crash, and we will continue to support them until we've recovered everyone.
You know, a lot of times in situations like this, it is a collective effort amongst the three jurisdictions in our area. Governor Youngkin spoke to us a short time ago about that. How quickly has this all come together since the events of 9 o'clock last night?
Well, I'm very proud of our team. I think that our first responders and our mutual assistance agreements have performed in the way that we all expect.
When you talk to folks right now as far as transportation around the area, obviously we're expecting this airport is going to open up later on today. Have you been giving any advice to people as far as modes of information they should be receiving and what things they should watch out for while they're traversing around the district and our regional area?
No, absolutely. For the traveling, the flying the public coming into Washington or leaving Washington, check in with your carriers to see what adjustments they've made today. The airport authority will open the airport at 11, but I know that a lot of flights have been adjusted.
We've had bad days here over the years, and I was thinking about the Navy Yard this morning, and obviously 9/11. As a lifelong resident of this area, what have your thoughts been over the course of the last 12 hours?
Well, it's such a shock because the likelihood of a non-commercial flight colliding with a commercial flight, we're all trying to figure out what exactly happened. We have a restricted airspace here, and the commercial flights are very closely monitored and choreographed coming in and out of the airport. So the bottom line is we want answers. We know that the NTSB is independent and very good at getting to answers. We hope that they will be transparent and share as much information as they have with the public as soon as possible. I expect that they'll be having a press conference at some point today outlining their process. I don't know if they'll be prepared to talk about a cause.
And having covered disasters before, you explained to folks earlier that we're going to have a transition now in the next couple of hours.
Yes.
We see behind us actually the National Transportation Safety Board.
Yes.
Briefing here. What transition role will that mean for the district government as this moves forward?
Well, it means that we're going to continue to support the effort, but the NTSB is the leader, and that's a well-honed practice that the emergency responders, we handle that emergency search and rescue effort, and then when we transition, as we have done, to a recovery effort, the NTSB takes over the investigation.
Eric, we know it's an incredibly busy morning. We appreciate time for some questions. And,
Thank you.
So that's the situation here at Reagan National Airport. Marissa and Steve, we'll send it back to you.
All right, Tom, thanks very much. Appreciate the mayor joining us this morning as well. 13 past the hour. We're keeping an eye on the White House. Keep in mind, these press briefings are very fluid.
Yeah.
Scheduled to happen at 11, could be any time now. Could be 11:30, could be, I mean, look, you're looking at the press, briefing room just as we are. Interesting, we saw the plane landing in the background of Lili's live shot, and that was the first plane that we saw land at the airport. As you have the big picture of Reagan National up now, the airport operations to begin at 11 o'clock this morning. Now, not all the planes are flying. As a matter of fact, more than 270, according to FlightAware, 270 outgoing flights are canceled today. But we did see that plane landing, and just tracking through FlightAware online, the first plane that landed was coming in from Minneapolis. So they would have left hours ago, knowing at some point that they could potentially land at Reagan National. There's a couple more that are currently on the way, I believe, one from Nashville, one from Houston. And then it looks like they're rerouting some of the planes back to Reagan National that they had to take to Dulles last night.
And we know that some people, too, who were at DCA decided to go to other airports or take Ubers or what have you. A lot of shifting took place in light of that collision that happened last night just before 9 o'clock. But we expect to hear more from officials. I know what we heard from Stephanie. She made a point to say, even with the first responders, they have heavy hearts. I think so often we think about them going out there and being mechanical and methodical about the work that they do, but it's pulling at their heartstrings because they, like us, have families at home. And whether you know the people directly who are involved in this, it could have been anybody.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's human, right? And we saw messages overnight from some of the responders who were just basically saying, you don't want to know what we've been having to do all night long. But they've been out there working, doing the heavy lifting for sure, trying to get whatever closure they can for the families. Let's take a look at what some of the other reaction has been, obviously, as we've been keeping an eye on things here, but we're hearing from some of our other partners here in the DMV. And, you hear from places like the Washington Nationals. Of course, Nationals Park is really right outside of where Stephanie Ramirez has been all morning. It's right outside the staging area where, unfortunately, has turned into a makeshift morgue / investigations area. But the Nationals clearly putting out their message saying that they're just devastated by the events that unfolded last night.
And the Washington Commanders are also chiming in a quote about last night's horrific accident over the Potomac River. They are mentioning the first responders being grateful for their efforts throughout the night, and finally saying, may God bless all of the victims.
And there you go, from some other folks, of course, in the area, just been putting out all the well wishes. And it's the kind of thing that takes everybody to just take a step back, and you realize about everybody's mortality. This photo right here is just I mean, that's really, to me, shows just how close this plane was to the airport, right? And I mean, that is just it's just a stunning photograph when you see the huge chunk of the fuselage and the wing section of that plane, and then you see where it was supposed to be and the destination right there in the background. It looks like you're just so close, right?
Yeah,
but so far.
Close. We talked about it earlier, Steve, to the point some of the people on boards reports of them sending text messages to their relatives saying, I'm about to land, so they were so close to making
I mean, you think about it, at that point of the journey, you're like within minutes of unbuckling the seatbelts and getting in line to get off the plane. And after a long trip, and in this case, a long trip from Wichita, Kansas. So, I mean, literally like in sight of the runway, wheels down, ready to land in just a few seconds when tragedy struck. Should we get back to Makia?
Yeah, let's go and check in with her. She's live at Haynes Point. Makia, you've been speaking with people walking by too, reacting to this collision.
Yeah, Marissa, Steve, I've really had a chance to get a pulse of just how the DMV is holding up this morning. But I want to take a moment to stop and just show you that some of the planes are right on schedule when it comes to the flight operations that Reagan National mentioned via X earlier this morning that would resume at 11 o'clock. This is the second Southwest flight that we've seen come in and land at the airport. I know that you guys were also encouraging those who do have travel plans to check with their airline carriers because some flights are delayed. Well, many are obviously delayed, but also some are canceled. But I can tell you that flight operations have resumed. We see the planes are just coming in and out once again at Reagan National. This just over about 11 hours since the tragedy on the Potomac that we saw overnight. Just to sort of also let you know where we are this morning, we're at Haynes Point, so we're just east of the river. Again, we can see Reagan National just from a distance, and then also Bolling Air Force Base not too far from that. But also, as it's been mentioned this morning, as the recovery mission continues, much of that debris has spread as far south as the National Harbor, and because of that, we've seen some changes happen there with regards to piers and the plaza being closed for now as investigations continue. Also, the National Park Service issued a notification as well. Parts of Ohio Drive here at Haynes Point is also closed to the public so that assistance can be done with those investigations as well as the recovery mission as well. So only a certain part, which is pretty much dominated right now by the media and a couple of runners and bike riders on this side of Haynes Point is currently opened. But for now, that's just a little bit of the action that we're seeing. We're seeing also just some of those icy patches finally melting along the Potomac River. We knew how much of a challenge this became for many of our first responders last night, but this is just sort of an update for now as to what's happening. So again, flights coming in and out so far that we have seen since 11 o'clock at Reagan National Airport, and Ohio Drive here at Haynes Point also closed to in response to the investigations that continue. All right, guys, I'm going to send it back to you.
Mikia, thanks very much. And the plane that landed while Mikia was talking, the Southwest plane that she mentioned, that one was coming in from Milwaukee and was actually only 30 minutes delayed. So not too much of a delay when you're looking at these. The flight that came in from Minneapolis was about 45 minutes delayed. And the next one that's going to pass over Mikia shortly is a flight coming in from Houston. And that one is actually 5 minutes early. So a lot of the airlines are catching up on that. Now, I did see that one plane did take off from DCA, but again, you know, there's still listed of hundreds that are canceled. They're going to have to make adjustments. So if you are flying today, just because you see some up in the air right now, that doesn't mean that yours necessarily is going to go. Please check with your airline, because it's our understanding that while the airport is open, it's up to each individual carrier as to whether or not they want to fly out of DCA today.
They can make their own adjustments. We are now less than 60 seconds out from hearing from President Trump. That's why we have that briefing room there in the upper right corner for you. But we certainly, the question that everyone has, amid the sadness, there's the shock, but there's the confusion as to how did something like this occur?
Yeah, and I mean, you've seen the videos online, and you know, you can make your own judgment call as to what you think happened there. The question is, we just don't know at this point. You know, we've all seen it, and you know, we heard from the Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy, earlier this morning. We'll hear from him again in a few minutes. And when he spoke at 7:30, 8 o'clock this morning, he said up until the moment of the collision, nothing was out of the ordinary. Everybody was supposed to be aware of everybody else. The plane was on the correct trajectory, and the helicopter was supposedly aware that there was aircraft in the area. We just don't know what happened.
And we also ruled out weather as an issue because it was clear. And speaking of weather, we had our chief meteorologist, Tucker Barnes. He said the good thing is that today there's no rain in the forecast, and that will help with the investigation and also the collection of all of the evidence. But we do expect to have rain tomorrow. So looks like President Trump is taking his place now on the podium. Let's listen in.
I'd like to request a moment of silence for the victims and their families, please. Thank you very much. I speak to you this morning in an hour of anguish for our nation. Just before 9 p.m. last night, an American Airlines regional jet carrying 60 passengers and 4 crew collided with an Army Black Hawk helicopter carrying 3 military service members over the Potomac River in Washington, D.C., while on final approach to Reagan National Airport. Both aircraft crashed instantly and were immediately submerged into the icy waters of the Potomac. Real tragedy. The massive search and rescue mission was underway throughout the night, leveraging every asset at our disposal. And I have to say, the local, state, federal, military, including the United States Coast Guard in particular, they've done a phenomenal job. so quick, so fast. It was mobilized immediately. The work has now shifted to a recovery mission. Sadly, there are no survivors. This was a dark and excruciating night in our nation's capital and in our nation's history, and a tragedy of terrible proportions. As one nation, we grieve for every precious soul that has been taken from us so suddenly. And we are a country of really, we are in mourning. This has really shaken a lot of people, including people, very sadly, from other nations who were on the flight. For the family members back in Wichita, Kansas, here in Washington, D.C., and throughout the United States and in Russia, we have a Russia contingent, some very talented people. Unfortunately, were on that plane. Very, very, very sorry about that. Whose loved ones were aboard the passenger jet. We can only begin to imagine the agony that you're all feeling. Nothing worse. On behalf of the First Lady, myself, and 340 million Americans, our hearts are shattered alongside yours, and our prayers are with you now and in the days to come. We'll be working very, very diligently in the days to come. We're here for you to wipe away the tears and to offer you our devotion, our love, and our support. There's great support. In moments like this, the differences between Americans fade to nothing compared to the bonds of affection and loyalty that unite us all, both as Americans and even as nations. We are one family, and today we are all heartbroken. We're all searching for answers. That icy, icy Potomac, it was a cold, cold night, cold water. We're all overcome with the grief for many who have so tragically perished, will no longer be with us. Together we take solace in the knowledge that their journey ended not in the cold waters of the Potomac, but in the warm embrace of a loving God. We do not know what led to this crash, but we have some very strong opinions and ideas, and I think we'll probably state those opinions now. Because over the years, I've watched as things like this happen, and they say, well, we're always investigating, and then the investigation 3 years later, they announce it. We think we have some pretty good ideas, but we'll find out how this disaster occurred, and we'll ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. The FAA and the NTSB and the U.S. military will be carrying out a systematic and comprehensive investigation. Our new Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, his second day on the job when that happened. It's a rough one. We'll be working tirelessly. He's a great gentleman. The whole group these are great people, and they are working tirelessly to figure out exactly what happened. We will state certain opinions, however. I'm also immediately appointing an acting commissioner to the FAA, Christopher Rocheleau, a 22-year veteran of the agency, highly respected. Christopher, thank you very much. Appreciate it. We must have only the highest standards for those who work in our aviation system. I changed the Obama standards from very mediocre at best to extraordinary. You remember that. Only the highest aptitude, they have to be the highest intellect and psychologically superior people were allowed to qualify for air traffic controllers. That was not so prior to getting there. When I arrived in 2016, I made that change very early on because I always felt this was a job that, and other jobs too, but this was a job that had to be superior intelligence. And we didn't really have that, and we had it. And then when I left office and Biden took over, he changed them back to lower than ever before. I put safety first. Obama, Biden, and the Democrats put policy first. And they put politics at a level that nobody's ever seen, because this was the lowest level. Their policy was horrible, and their politics was even worse. So as you know, last week, long before the crash, I signed an executive order restoring our highest standards for air traffic controllers and other important jobs throughout the country. So it was very interesting. About a week ago, almost upon entering office, I signed something last week that was an executive order, very powerful, on restoring the highest standards of air traffic controllers and others, by the way. Then my administration will set the highest possible bar for aviation safety. We have to have our smartest people. It doesn't matter what they look like, how they speak, who they are. It matters intellect, talent, the word talent. They have to be talented, naturally talented geniuses. You can't have regular people doing that job. They won't be able to do it. But we'll restore faith in American air travel. I'll have more to say about that. I do want to point out that various articles that appeared prior to my entering office, and here's one. The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. That is amazing. And then it says FAA says people with severe disabilities are most underrepresented segment of the workforce, and they want them in, and they want them, they can be air traffic controllers. I don't think so. This was in January 14th, so that was a week before I entered office. They put a big push to put diversity into the FAA's program. Then another article, the Federal Aviation Administration, this was before I got to office, recently, second term. The FAA is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website. Can you imagine? These are people that are, I mean, actually, their lives are shortened because of the stress that they have. Brilliant people have to be in those positions, and their lives are actually shortened, very substantially shortened, because of the stress, where you have many, many planes coming into one target, and you need a very special talent and a very special genius to be able to do it. Targeted disabilities are those disabilities that the federal government, as a matter of policy, has identified for special emphasis in recruitment and hiring. The FAA's website states they include hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism all qualify for the position of a controller of airplanes pouring into our country, pouring into a little spot, a little dot on the map, a little runway. The initiative is part of the FAA's diversity and inclusion hiring plan. Think of that. The initiative is part of the FAA's diversity and inclusion hiring plan, which says diversity is integral to achieving FAA's mission of ensuring safe and efficient travel. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's just the opposite. The FAA website shows that the agency's guidance on diversity hiring were last updated on March 23rd of 22. They wanted to make it even more so. And then I came in, and I assume maybe this is the reason. The FAA, which is overseen by Secretary Pete Buttigieg, a real winner. That guy's a real winner. Do you know how badly everything's run since he's run this Department of Transportation? He's a disaster. He was a disaster as a mayor. He ran his city into the ground, and he's a disaster now. He's just got a good line of bullshit. The Department of Transportation, his government agency charged with regulating civil aviation. Well, he runs it, 45,000 people, and he's run it right into the ground with his diversity. So I had to say that it's terrible. Then it's a group within the FAA, another story, determined that the workforce was too white, that they had concerted efforts to get the administration to change that and to change it immediately. This was in the Obama administration just prior to my getting there. And we took care of African Americans, Hispanic Americans. We took care of everybody at levels that nobody's ever seen before. It's one of the reasons I won. But they actually came out with a directive, too white. And we want the people that are competent. But now we mourn and we pray, and would like to ask all Americans to join me in a moment of silence as we ask God to watch over those who have lost their lives and bring comfort to the loved ones. And I just want to say God bless everyone in this room. This has been a terrible, very short period of time. We'll get to the bottom of it. So we all saw the same thing. We've seen it many times. I've had the honor of hearing tapes. Tapes are scary, very scary tapes. You had a airliner coming in, American Airlines. He was doing everything right. He was on track. He was the same track as everybody else. They came in. It's probably the same track as they've had for 25 years or more. He's coming in the path. And for some reason, he had a helicopter that was at the same height, obviously when they hit, but pretty much the same height, and going at an angle that was unbelievably bad. When the air traffic controller said, do you see, he was talking about, do you see him? But there was very little time left when that was stated. And then also he said, follow him in. And then almost immediately after that, seconds after that, there was the crash that took place. Well, you follow him in, that means like everything's fine, follow him in. You had a pilot problem from the standpoint of the helicopter. I mean, because it was visual. It was a very clear night. It was cold, but clear, and clear as you could be. The American Airlines plane had lights blazing. They had all of their landing lights on. I could see it from the Kennedy Center tape. We had a tape up on the Kennedy Center. That seems to be the primary. Thus far, I'm sure we'll see other tapes because it's such an area where there are a lot of cameras looking up into the air, into space. So we'll probably see many other shots of it before too much time goes by. But we had a situation where you had a helicopter that had the ability to stop. I have helicopters. You can stop a helicopter very quickly. It had the ability to go up or down. It had the ability to turn. And the turn it made was not the correct turn, obviously. It did somewhat the opposite of what it was told. We don't know that that would have been the difference because the timing was so tight. It was so little. There was so little time to think. But what you did have is you had vision. The helicopter had vision of the plane because you had vision of it all the way, perfect vision of it all the way from at Kennedy Center where the tape was taken. And for some reason, there weren't adjustments made. Again, you could have slowed down the helicopter substantially. You could have stopped the helicopter. You could have gone up. You could have gone down. You could have gone straight up, straight down. You could have turned. You could have done a million different maneuvers. For some reason, it just kept going and then made a slight turn at the very end. And by that time, it was too late. They shouldn't have been at the same height because if it was at the same height, you could have gone under it or over it and nobody realized, or they didn't say that it's at the same height. At the same height, it still wouldn't have been great, but you would have missed it by quite a bit. Could have been 1,000 feet higher. It could have been 200 feet lower, but it was exactly at the same height, and somebody should have been able to point that out. So all of this is going to be studied, but it just seems to me from a couple of words that I like to use, the words common sense, some really bad things happened, and some things happened that shouldn't have happened. So you had a helicopter going in an identical direction. You had a helicopter that was at the exact same height as somebody going in essentially the opposite direction. You had a plane that was following a track, which is a track that every other plane followed. And I don't imagine, I know I've heard today that they might have been following the preceding plane, which was pretty close, but not that close, the preceding plane. But you wouldn't have even been able to see that because of the direction that the helicopter was coming in at. So you had a confluence of bad decisions that were made. And you have people that lost their lives, violently lost their lives. We're going to take a few questions. I'd like to ask our new Secretary of Transportation to say a few words. Sean Duffy, great gentleman, just started. It's not your fault, and I know you agree with me very strongly on intellect and even psychological well-being of the air traffic control. It's such an important position, and I think I can't emphasize stronger. I changed it when I first ran in 2016. I changed it. We had the highest standard that you could have, and then they changed it back. That was Biden, to a standard I read it to you. That was from one of your papers. One of the people in this room actually wrote that. And then I changed it back a few days ago. And unfortunately, that was, we'll see. We don't know that necessarily it's even the controller's fault. But one thing we do know, there was a lot of vision, and people should have been able to see that, at what point do you stop? At what point do you say, wow, that plane's getting a little bit close? So this is a tragedy that should not have happened. Please, Sean.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I would just note the president's leadership has been remarkable during this crisis. We've had a whole of government response, local, state, federal. And when you see that kind of cooperation, it begins with the leadership in this body. So thank you for that, Mr. President. You make our jobs a lot easier. You made an important point that when we deal with safety, we can only accept the best and the brightest in positions of safety that impact the lives of our loved ones, our family members. And I think you make a really important point on that, Mr. President. That is the motto of your presidency, the best and the brightest, the most intelligent coming into these spaces. I want to take a moment and extend my condolences to the families of the loved ones. We commit to them that we are going to get to the bottom of this investigation, not in 3 years, not in 4 years, but as quickly as possible with the NTSB, who is here today, as well as the FAA. What happened yesterday shouldn't have happened. It should not have happened. And when Americans take off in airplanes, they should expect to land at their destination. That didn't happen yesterday. That's unacceptable. And so we will not accept excuses. We will not accept passing the buck. We are going to take responsibility at the Department of Transportation and the FAA to make sure we have the reforms that have been dictated by President Trump in place to make sure that these mistakes do not happen again. And again, I want to thank you for your leadership, Mr. President. And I appreciate the confidence you placed in me. Thank you.
Pete, would you like to say something?
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Again, I want to echo what the Transportation Secretary said about your leadership. From the moment we found out about this, we were in contact with the White House trying to determine exactly what happened. I would echo it as well. No excuses. We're going to get to the bottom of this. We first and foremost from the Defense Department want to pass our condolences to the 64 souls and their families that were affected by this. Never should happen. And certainly the 3 service members, the 3 soldiers, a young captain, staff sergeant, and a CW2 chief warrant officer on a routine annual retraining of night flights on a standard corridor for a continuity of government mission. The military does dangerous things. It does routine things on the regular basis. Tragically, last night, a mistake was made. I think the president is right. There was some sort of an elevation issue that we have immediately begun investigating at the DOD and Army level. Army CID is on the ground investigating. Top tier aviation assets inside the DOD are investigating, sir, to get to the bottom of it so that it does not happen again, because it's absolutely unacceptable. But I want to echo what the Transportation Secretary and you, Mr. President, said, because it pertains to the DOD as well. We will have the best and brightest in every position possible. As you said in your inaugural, it is colorblind and merit-based. The best leaders possible, whether it's flying Black Hawks and flying airplanes, leading platoons, or in government. The era of DEI is gone at the Defense Department, and we need the best and brightest, whether it's in our air traffic control, or whether it's in our generals, or whether it's throughout government. So thank you for your leadership and courage on that, sir. and we'll stand by you on it. Thank you.
Very much. JD, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, for your leadership. I just want to reemphasize something the President said, and you've heard from the Secretary of Transportation and of Defense. There really was a whole of government response. We were all on the phone. We were all communicating yesterday, trying to get to the bottom of this immediately, but also try to communicate with the American people about what happened. Something the President said that I think bears reemphasizing, which is that when you don't have the best standards in who you're hiring, it means on the one hand, you're not getting the best people in government, but on the other hand, it puts stresses on the people who are already there. And I think that is a core part of what President Trump is going to bring and has already brought to Washington, D.C. is we want to hire the best people because we want the best people at air traffic control. And we want to make sure we have enough people at air traffic control who are actually competent to do the job. If you go back to just some of the headlines over the past 10 years, you have many hundreds of people suing the government because they would like to be air traffic controllers, but they were turned away because of the color of their skin. That policy ends under Donald Trump's leadership because safety is the first priority of our aviation industry. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, on DEI and the claims that you've made, are you saying this crash was somehow caused and the result of diversity hiring? And what evidence have you seen to support these claims?
It just could have been. We have a high standard. We've had a much higher standard than anybody else. And there are things where you have to go by brain power. You have to go by psychological quality. And psychological quality is a very important element of it. These are various very powerful tests that we put to use, and they were terminated by Biden. And Biden went by a standard that's the exact opposite. So we don't know, but we do know that you had two planes at the same level. You had a helicopter and a plane. That shouldn't have happened. And we'll see. We're going to look into that, and we're going to see. But certainly for an air traffic controller, we want the brightest, the smartest, the sharpest. We want somebody that's psychologically superior. And that's what we're going to have. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Mr. President, you mentioned at the top of the briefing that there were several Russian nationals on the flight.
Yes.
Will the U.S. government be willing to facilitate the transfer of their remains, considering the fact there is no direct air travel between the two countries?
We've already been in contact with Russia, and the answer is yes, we will facilitate. Yes. Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. The situation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo is getting worse, even though President John Lorenzo has been mediating the conflict between Rwanda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo because he wants to bring peace and stability. The situation is really bad right now. I want to hear from Mr. President if you have any plan in the future to bring peace in the Democratic Republic of the Congo.
You're asking me a question about Rwanda, and it is a very serious problem. I agree, but I don't think it's appropriate right now to talk about it. But it is a very serious problem.
Do you even yet know the names of the 67 people who were killed? And you are blaming Democrats and DEI policies and air traffic control and seemingly the member of the U.S. military who was flying that Black Hawk helicopter. Don't you think you're getting ahead of the investigation right now?
No, I don't think so at all. I don't think with the names of the people, you mean the names of the people that are on the plane? You think that's going to make a difference?
Does it come for their families?
They are a
blaming
group of
DEI
people that have lost their lives. If you want a list of the names, we can give you that. We'll be giving that very soon. We're in coordination with American Airlines. We're in coordination very strongly, obviously, with the military. But I think that's not a very smart question. I'm surprised coming from you. Please.
Thank you. Thank you, President Trump. Thank you for being here. Based on your analysis so far, do you have a sense of who is at fault? If it was the plane, the helicopter, air traffic control, and can you assure people that it is safe to fly in and out of D.C.?
Well, I've given you the analysis, and the analysis was based on vision. You had a lot of people that saw what was happening. You had some people that knew what was happening. There was some warnings, but the warnings were given very, very late. You know, those warnings were given very late. It was almost as they were given a few seconds later, there was the crash. It should have been brought up earlier. But the people in the helicopter should have seen where they were going. I can't imagine people with 20/20 vision not seeing what's happening up there. Again, they shouldn't have been at the same height. You're going in reverse directions or sideway directions. Obviously, you want to be at different heights. I see it all the time when I'm flying. You have planes going in the opposite. They're always lower, we're higher, or they're. So if somehow there's a screw up, there's not going to be a tragedy. It'll be close, but there's never going to be a tragedy if you're at a different elevation. For whatever reason, they were at the same elevation. And also, from the American Airlines Center, he's along the track that every plane is along. You say, what was a helicopter doing in that track? It's very sad. But visually, somebody should have been able to see and taken that helicopter out of play, and they should have been at a different height.
Thank you, sir. You mentioned the Russians that were on board that plane. What other nationalities were on board that passenger?
There were a couple of others. We're going to be announcing it in about an hour. We have some very specific information. We're calling the countries. We've spoken to most of them, but there were some other countries represented.
Spoken to President Putin?
I have not, no.
Mr. President, on your
Not about this.
On your executive order, you've already issued an executive order. You say will restore aviation safety.
Right.
This crash happened after that. Was the executive order successful, and what more needs to change to keep people safe?
Well, we issued it 3 days ago, and we're in the process of making those changes. This is something that should have been done a long time ago. Actually, my original order should have never been changed, and I think maybe you wouldn't have had this problem. Maybe. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. We see like everyday life that very often those diversity hires cause sometimes issues, as you just mentioned. So what plan do you have? Are we going to see some fire? Are you going to fire some of those diversity hire in the federal government? What plan do you have?
I would say the answer is yes. If we find that people aren't mentally competent, you see the language. The language is put out by them. And if you see that, I'm not going to bore you by reading it again, but these are not people that should be doing this particular job. They'd be very good for certain jobs, but not people that should be doing this particular job.
Mr. President, you have today blamed the diversity elements, but then told us that you weren't sure that the controllers made any mistake. You then said perhaps the helicopter pilots were the ones who made the mistake.
It's all under investigation.
I understand that. That's why I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't. We want brilliant people doing this. This is a major chess game at the highest level. When you have 60 planes coming in during a short period of time, and they're all coming in different directions, and you're dealing with very high-level computer work and very complex computers. And one of the other things I will tell you is that the systems that were built, I was going to rebuild the entire system, and then we had an election that didn't turn out the way it should have. But they didn't build the systems properly. They spent a lot of money renovating a system, spending much more money than they would have spent if they bought a new system for air traffic controllers, meaning the computerized systems. There are certain companies that do a very good job. They didn't use those companies. They used companies that should not have been doing it. No, I think it's very important to understand that for some jobs, and not only this, but air traffic controllers, they have to be at the highest level of genius. Okay.
I want to ask you about the ice skaters in a moment because the U.S. ice skating community was affected. But first, if I can, the cited FAA text that you read is real. But the implication that this policy is new or that it stems from efforts that began under President Biden or the Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg is demonstrably false. It's been on the FAA's website.
That, you?
No, it's on the website, the FAA's website. It was there in 2013. It was there for the entirety.
What I read.
It was there for the entirety of your administration too. So my question is, why didn't you change the policy during your first administration?
I did change it. I changed the Obama policy, and we had a very good policy. And then Biden came in and he changed it. And then when I came in 2 days, 3 days ago, I signed a new order bringing it to the highest level of intelligence. Okay.
It was on the website.
Please. Quiet.
Thank you. Welcome back to the. I'm sorry.
You mentioned that a vision was probably the problem that was at issue in this crash. There's been some reports that one of the pilots in the helicopter may have been using night vision equipment. Was there any
I heard
indication?
that. We don't know. We're going to know that pretty soon. It may change your view plan if you do have the night vision. So it's very possible that could have happened. That would be maybe a reason why you wouldn't actually see as well as on a clear night. You can see sometimes better without it. I have a couple of more.
Mr. President, is it helpful to have your Secretary of Transportation confirmed, and does this intensify your interest in getting other nominees confirmed quickly?
Go ahead, what?
Is it helpful to have your Secretary of Transportation confirmed, and does this intensify your interest in getting other nominees confirmed quickly as well?
Well, sure, we want fast confirmations, and the Democrats, as you know, are doing everything they can to delay them. They've taken too long. We're struggling to get very good people that everybody knows are going to be confirmed, but we're struggling to get them out faster. We want them out faster. It's a good question, actually. We've been pushing Sean. Everyone knows Sean for a long time. He got many, many Democrat votes, but they want to take as long as they can. They ask questions like some of the questions that Peter would ask that were totally irrelevant and not very good questions, but they want to just keep it going. They want to keep it going as long as possible. I was very honored, actually, that you got so many Democrat votes. That was really good. That was really good.
When I apply to meet with the families, and second question, is it your impression that military training was done during that time?
The what?
The training that the helicopter was involved in. Is it anything you can tell us about
You
that?
don't know. These are the things that will come up with the investigation. You don't know. But the helicopter obviously was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and a tragedy occurred. Please.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've got a question about the...
No, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. You've been critical of the current regulations, and you've called for big reforms at FAA. I'm curious, sir,
I made the reforms, actually.
What is your message?
3 days ago, I made that.
Yes, sir. What is your message then to the American public in the weeks and months ahead? Should they feel hesitant to fly? And if you could clarify perhaps something that the Defense Secretary said when he said that this helicopter was on a continuity of government mission?
I don't know what that refers to, but they were practicing. They do that. They call it practicing, and they were. And that's something that should be done. It's only continuity in the sense that we want to have very good people, and that has to be in continuity, and that's what they refer to. But it was basically practice, and it was a practice that worked out very, very badly. Okay.
On his question, the first question, should people be hesitant to fly right now?
No, not at all. I've not hesitated to fly. This is something that it's been many years that something like this has happened. And the collision is just something that we don't expect ever to happen again. We are going to have the highest level people we've already hired. Some of the people that you've already hired for that position, long before we knew about this, I mean, long before, from the time I came in, we started going out and getting the best people, because I said it's not appropriate what they're doing. I think it's a tremendous mistake. You know, they like to do things and they like to take them too far, and this is sometimes what ends up happening. Now, with that, I'm not blaming the controller. I'm saying there are things that you could question, like the height of the helicopter, the height of the plane being at the same level and going in opposite directions. It's not a positive. But no, we're already hiring people. No, flying is very safe. We have the safest flying anywhere in the world, and we'll keep it that way. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much.
A lot to get through there.
Many
a lot
layers.
to try to digest through all the layers of the conversation. The bottom line is, when it comes to what was the matter at hand, which is the collision between the helicopter and the aircraft last night, not a lot of new information. As the President Trump said, he's like, we have some opinions that we want to throw out there, but eventually he did by simply saying, how could you not see something, referring to the pilot of the helicopter when it is your job to see something. I think a couple of things that were new, Marissa, again, sticking to the facts of what will be the investigation into this, we did learn about the ranks of those who are on board the helicopter, 2 staff sergeants and a chief warrant officer. And we also through the question that was asked and the response may or may not have been night vision involved. That's all going to be part of the investigation.
Yeah, and President Trump definitely echoing what he posted on Truth Social shortly after the collision about what he believed was to blame for it. I do want to mention, too, that Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy did say he believed that an elevation issue was involved, was, a part of this. But of course, they will really work harder to get down to exactly what caused the crash. But in terms of nuts and bolts, that's the best that we got out of it.
Right. Yeah. So not a lot of new information now. And, listen, these investigations, they can very easily take a long time. Although you heard Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy saying that we don't want this to take years. We want to get to the bottom of it and try to figure it out. Now, you heard everything else that was involved, not exactly on target for the investigation. A lot of DEI talk throughout administration officials, obviously trying to make their playbook well known to while they have the ear of America. It is to be seen if that has any impact on the crash at all. Right now, there's nothing substantiating any direct correlation between that aspect of things and what played out last night.
Absolutely.
This appears to be some type of most likely human error. Even Sean Duffy saying that this should not have happened. We're going to get to the bottom of it, but from what we know right now, this is something that just should not have happened.
And also, we won't make excuses, and we'll make sure that we get to the bottom of it so it does not indeed happen again. I want to go out live now to Tom Fitzgerald. He is at Reagan National Airport. Tom, I know you were watching that briefing just like us. Initial reaction.
Well, we heard a lot there. What takes small bites out of this? There was really two components of what we just heard. There was an operational section of this, and clearly there was a political section of this as well. So let's start with the operational point. What do we know right now? What is being done? The news that the president revealed right out of the gate here is that he has named an acting FAA administrator. Now, you may remember the previous FAA administrator had resigned prior to President Trump taking office. This will be Christopher Rocheleau, the president says, who will now effectively be in charge of the Federal Aviation Administration. The president said in detail the audio and video recordings that he had listened to and watched. One of particular, the president said one from the Kennedy Center, which he was able to see the midair collision between the Army helicopter and this American Airlines flight. He also then didn't go on to say that he had listened to recordings as well, too, extensively from ATC, air traffic control, which led the president to question some of the decisions that were made, repeating what the air traffic controller had said to the helicopter at one point: do you see them? The president says, he wants answers to these questions that people have. And he says, previously in previous air disasters, in the rollout of these things, he says sometimes it can take years for those answers to be coming forward. The president says he wants those answers sooner rather than later. That we also did hear from the current head of Transportation Department, Sean Duffy, once again reiterating that air safety in the United States, in his words, is the safest in the world. And then we also heard from the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance. At that point, there was also a political component of this as well, too, Sean and Marissa, and we can go into that if you would like as well.
Yeah, let's get right into it. I mean, he spoke very openly and blatantly about DEI initiatives that were made by previous Democratic administrations. I'm curious to know your thoughts on that, because at this hour, we don't know who, in terms of their races, nationalities, genders, were on the aircraft. So I think some of the reporters there were asking, how are you drawing that connection, and if there's any? And at this point, we really don't know.
Yeah, I think, Marissa, earlier in our coverage today, you had asked me about a differentiation between the president's posts on his own social media site, Truth Social, and the official White House account that had come out. They were, radically different in tone. And what I can tell you is that that's kind of what we heard in the middle section of this, where the president went into some political debates surrounding all of this. Now, he read from several articles, although he did not quote which ones they were, basically saying that DEI, diversity, inclusion, and equity changes that he claimed had been made under both of President Obama and President Biden, in his words, led to the hiring of people with, in his words, psychiatric and mental deficiencies, as well as intellectual and mental deficiency. The president then went on to launch a viscerally personal attack on the former Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg. I won't repeat what the president said, however, it was a graphic language. Anybody who was just listening heard it. But he also did say at the end there that he is not blaming this on the air traffic controller, and there are more answers that need to be forthcoming.
Like you said, Tom, I mean, you said it great off the top. There was two different elements in play here, right? There was the element when it comes to this investigation, and then there was the political element that got a lot of attention and will continue to get a lot of attention as well. Right now, there's no correlation between the two that we know anything about. And if there were, it would come out in the investigation. But right now, I think most people are focused on what it was that went wrong here. Yeah. And to be clear, and I know the president made a lot of references to the air traffic controllers and the helicopter. In most cases, even if it's a military helicopter that is flying in the airspace around Reagan National Airport, once that initial communication is made, the air traffic controller's position, and this is my understanding, is that you let them know. Everybody lets each other know we're going to be in this airspace. Okay, here's what you look out for. Here's what we have coming in. Here's what we have coming out. And at that point, once that conversation is had, at that point for the helicopter, it's a visual. At that point, you just make sure that you are not in anybody else's way or causing any issues. And that first conversation happened. So if that part was there, then it appears that the air traffic controllers had that communication, which was made. And at that point, something happened with the helicopter.
Which goes back to Duffy's original comment and remarks, is that everything was standard, really up until just a few seconds before the crash.
All right, let's get to Lily Zhang. She's outside Reagan National this morning. She's kind of down by Gravely Point. Let's check back in with her now as we're continuing to hear from more and more people down at the airport.
Hey there, good afternoon to you guys. Yeah, so we are by Gravely Point. This is about a few hundred yards away from the runways at Reagan National. I can tell you in the past half hour, 45 minutes or so, we've seen about a half dozen planes coming in and landing. I haven't seen any take off necessarily from here yet, but that's just in the past half hour or so. Behind us, what's happening is we are seeing a lot of first responders, people who have responded to this incident in terms of the recovery efforts, like we've been reporting throughout the morning. According to DC fire officials, they are confident that the remains of those who have died in this crash will be found, but it does take time. And this is kind of an idea of the massive effort that's underway right now. All of the people who are here trying to resolve all this and trying to make sure that everyone is found. I do also want to tell you, Gravely Point is typically an area where people either come and watch planes take off and land. It is also, as we've learned, a spot for a lot of Uber drivers, Lyft drivers who are out here working every day. And I just met a gentleman, if you can come here real quick, sir. This is Eshmael. Eshmael, you mentioned you are a Lyft driver, right?
Yes.
What is this area? Bring me up to speed. You and I were talking a little bit off camera.
Yeah, this is like the Lyft hub and the Uber hub. Like any driver who drives Lyft or Uber, they usually come over here to wait in the queue for like a ride. Like any plane that lands down, whoever requests the ride when they get out of the plane, it literally comes into whoever Lyft queue right here, like right on the spot. And it's just like, I guess maybe the airport made it like that way. So that way passengers are able to get like rides in an effective way at a faster rate than having to wait for like 30 minutes to an hour for the drivers to come from like downtown or like further places. So they just created this spot just for that. But also some, locals who come to fish or ride in the boat, they also park over here.
So what have you seen this morning? Have you been driving around? Have you been just having to park in one spot?
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on the day. Like today, because there's a lot of planes that's coming in, and also due to the crash, we all came over here because whenever we get a ride over here, we go down into the city. And over here also makes it more easier to make like money without wasting gas and driving around or sitting down and waiting for like somebody with a shorter pay ride. Like over here, sometimes the ride's like $50, $60, like longer distance. If you want like a longer distance trip.
And Ishmael, do you fly often?
I haven't flown in like about 6 months, but I used to fly often.
Tell me about how you're absorbing what you've seen and heard so far. As a flyer, does this make you nervous? Have you ever been nervous before?
I mean, I'm nervous a little bit right now because this is my first time being on any news channel. But it does make me a little bit nervous because now, like, you know, whenever I get in the plane, I'm gonna have to think about if there's something else that might be in the air that might, you know, where there's maybe perhaps the pilot wasn't communicating what's going on around them. And if we take off, maybe if we hear something or something running to us, like it's kind of like bringing like a little bit of fear to someone like me who flies often, because this is like a huge tragedy. And you know, my condolence to the families who might have lost a family member from the crash.
Absolutely. Ishmael, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you, sir. No problem. Yeah, so that's kind of what we're hearing out here, guys. You know, again, this is typically an area where people are coming to watch the